Om Shanti. So this is the entire story from the beginning, middle to the end. And it's basically the story of the human soul and how it reaches a point where it needs the Supreme Soul. And when it needs the Supreme Soul, eventually it finds the Supreme Soul and becomes recharged from discharged. So when there's sorrow, the soul will think of God, and when there's happiness, the soul won't think of God. The soul, the human soul, needs a body to play its role. As long as it's happy, then it doesn't need the Supreme Soul. When it plays many roles, has many lives on the world stage, then it becomes discharged and needs the services of the Supreme Soul, primarily peace, primarily love, primarily happiness. And so once it's recharged, it is fully charged with peace, with love, with happiness. The Supreme Soul's role is quite unique because he doesn't come into the cycle of birth and death, birth and rebirth. He stays outside a cycle, a drama of time, and only in the final throes of the cycle does he come into play his role. So he's not just an actor who plays his role at the end of the cycle, he's also the director, because he's redirecting, he's directing it back towards the way it was. So in effect, the cycle of time, when the soul first starts its playing its roles on earth, the soul is in its true identity. That means it goes from a state of order and over thousands of years goes into a state of entropy, which is chaos. So when it's in a state of order, everything reflects that. So the soul is in its true identity of being the soul. It means I'm ageless, timeless, genderless, no religion, because I'm full, satisfied, and everything of the nature reflects that. The animal kingdom is at peace. They're not in fear of their life because there is no impurity, negativity within the human soul. The soul is fully charged, so doesn't need anything except the body to play its role. So why are we here? To express a beautiful divine nature which is coming from the very seat, the very core of the soul's being. I am what I am. I don't identify with the body to find what I am. I'm not searching because I've already found that. I've already been charged, recharged by the source who doesn't have a physical form of his own, a point of pure energy that is the father of all the children who are playing their roles. So we play our roles, and souls have different capacities. An important aspect of playing the role: some are old souls, some are new souls, some play 70, 80 births in this cycle, this eternal wheel, this eternal cycle of birth and death. At the beginning point, the soul is happy to be in the drama because it's happy, and so nothing outside is there to make it unhappy, because as the mind, the state of consciousness, so the matter displays the affections that are in the soul. So the nature itself is displaying a very happy state. All the trees full of fruits, all the flowers in full bloom, a spring-like weather all year round, oceans clean, rivers clean, everything as it should be, as people would like it to be. But the souls come from the home of silence, from a world or a dimension of light that is beyond the material form. And when the matter is in the womb, it calls the soul down to play its role, that particular soul for that particular body. That's what the soul is connected to. The role is in the soul. All the souls have roles within them. It's an eternal factor that some souls play roles of 70, 80 births, and some souls play roles of one birth. So in effect, it's just like a play or a film, really, when certain souls have more and bigger parts in a drama and a film or a play, and other souls just have small parts. They won't mind because they will never know. They will play their role at the end of the cycle when they're meant to play their role, which is why the world population has doubled in size since the 1950s. And so at the beginning, when the souls, the old souls, are playing their roles when the world is in its freshest state, the souls live in the consciousness of the soul, with peace, with love, with happiness. When the soul leaves the body, there isn't any mourning. Mourning as in not morning and evening, but mourning as in missing that person, because the soul's aware that the souls are fully connected. So there's a connection of love, not a connection of attachment. For this reason, there is no bereavement. The soul is in celebration that a soul who's leaving an old body will take another one, and there is no disturbance, not even a thought of that person, because they're not identifying with their bodies, they're identifying with their family feelings of brotherhood. So as the souls reincarnate, they go through this beautiful, beautiful cycle of complete happiness, total happiness, to a duality state where the soul becomes slightly affected, just ever so lightly affected by matter, and the matter starts to create the feeling of desire within the soul, and the soul becomes preoccupied with this desire over a period of time. The desire, like any desire, starts as a feeling, a curiosity, then it enters the thoughts, then the intellect starts to work out how that would feel, how that would taste, what that would be, what sensation that would be. So what's actually happening is the soul is moving over thousands of years from a state of joy to a state of enjoy. But first the joy is kept in a very powerful form, so it's constantly joyful. And when the joy lessens slightly because the soul's using its charge, then it starts to enjoy. So it only starts as a tiny seed. the feeling of curiosity about what that would feel, what sensations, what a pleasure it may be. In the original state of the soul is the pleasure, the soul is the joy, and it's now identifying with something other than itself for what it believes to be a pure state of joy. And when it does so, it has a liking, it starts to develop a taste. It's not like beer, where they don't like the taste at first and then they acquire. It's not like smoking, when they don't like the taste of the smoke at first and become adjusted to it. It gives the feeling, the sense of pleasure. And the secret is in that word sense, because it's now using its senses. So the mind, which is the spiritual organ, is now sensing joy from the material form. And once it has a taste, it develops a liking, and as the liking grows, and there's a feeling of this thing is giving me something, it becomes part of my identity. It can be a person, it can be a thing, an object, it can be the body, where I actually reach the ripe old age of 120 odd years, because they live longer in the body, because they're not stressing the body with their state of mind and state of desires. So they live in a very healthy state, a very wealthy state, because health and wealth are here. The relationship with the self is good, so the relationship with others is not of paramount importance, but will be good because the relationship with the self is good. When pleasure starts, the soul starts to enjoy. So it starts to become more aware of a physical identity. And that goes on for thousands of years. In the meantime, because the world is showing signs of suffering, because it's no longer in a good state, it's starting to do bad things to get happiness, to get love, to get peace. So the intervention of pure souls come from the home onto the world stage to play their roles, to sustain. And this is only to sustain the discharge. So the discharge isn't too quick. So souls are only meant to come. This is a secret to the drama. Souls don't come to liberate souls. That's God's job. Souls just come from the home to sustain the downfall. Sustain the downfall of humanity. And even in this life, we've taken support of people, no doubt, that we thought would educate us in something that will change our lives. So the soul carries this memory, but it's not a memory of human beings. It's a memory of the Supreme Soul that all souls have built inside of them. When do they remember the Supreme Soul, God, whatever word you wish to use? When there's sorrow, when they're suffering, when they're not themselves, they want to be someone else or something else. If they were themselves, their true selves, then there wouldn't be any calling out and God would be made redundant. So all human souls at the present time, when the downfall is happening, take support of human souls, souls in human bodies, and the downfall is slowed, because as long as you believe that you're being liberated, as long as you feel that these people love me, then you're kept busy with love. and it's done its job. It was meant to be like that. It could be at that period of time that it's another 1,000, 2,000 years before the need for God will come, because God has to come at the end of all the souls playing their roles. Now, all souls are charged, fully charged at the beginning, but some souls are 100-volt batteries and some souls are just 3-volt batteries. So some souls of a 3-volt nature will have to have their most elevated heaven on earth. You can't compare the two. The 3-volt battery isn't going to compare himself with a 100-volt battery, and a 100-volt battery should not be saying, why are they only a 3-volt battery? This is an eternal thing. There are certain things that are eternal, and eternal means without beginning, without end. You can't put anything more into it, and you can't take anything out of it. It is what it is because it is. If people would just learn to accept that it is what it is because it is, they would be much wiser, much lighter, much brighter, much more closer to their true nature of stillness, stabilities. So what happens with the curiosity when the soul first starts to lose its intense inner joy of being itself? It starts to create like an adoration of the question mark. It starts to become more curious, and the more curious it becomes and thinks it's having its desires fulfilled. Agreed. It's meant to be like that, but it will continue on its downfall because while the things are not giving that amount of happiness, it has to increase its sensationalism. It has to increase its feeling of expansion. It has to expand on more and more, and getting more and more will make it feel bigger and better about itself. But it's an illusion, because the soul's already in tune with matter in a out of tune kind of way. It's now getting its happiness from all the material desires, and there's a whole list of material things, and the sensationalism can be as gross as where your own life is threatened on the bungee jumping and the drops from 5,000 feet with a parachute, and no doubt if they could they would try it without a parachute if they can get more of a buzz from it. So the soul's gone from a buzzing state where people say I'm buzzing, but they're normally talking about a thing that gives them that buzz. And this is why there's all the complications in relationships, because now all the souls have come down. We're gone from the beginning of the cycle to the end of the cycle. And this is why relationships are so gross now, and so crass, really, if I can use that word, crass, in the sense of human beings have to show a sensational love rather than just tokens of love, and then they move on to their next one, and when things don't give them that buzz, they have to do more of the same, and as they do so, they're becoming more dependent on the happiness of the physical senses. Because remember I said that the mind is the sense organ of the soul, and the physical sense organs are being used for getting peace, love and happiness. So people have to do something to be somewhere, to be with people, to have that level of joy, which is the inner self, the relationship with the inner self. So we get to a point where the world's got worse and worse and worse, even though technology's got better and better and better. And people who say that they're much better off than they were when they were younger aren't seeing the whole story. Sorry. Because very often that's just a karmic return of some good they've done in the past, and it's coming their way at the present time, but it will only serve them because the soul is losing its power. So it's actually taking whilst giving, and it's not a state of pure giving, because there's a price for everything. If you do something for someone often enough and you don't get any return whatsoever, then it will eventually wear you down. And that's only because we're out of sync with our true state of love, which is where God comes in, really, because the Supreme Soul comes into the medium's body and actually tells us that, sweet children, you were originally the pure deities. Your souls, consider yourself to be a soul, and remember me alone. Break attachment, but don't break connection. Keep connection with people, but break the attachment, the neediness of their existence being needed to give me happiness, their presence with me needed to give me happiness. It will only be temporary, because as soon as they go, I'll be back to where I was again. Why? Because the whole problem is an identity crisis. In the consciousness of the body, I relate to bodies for my happiness. In the consciousness of the soul, I relate to the Supreme Soul for my happiness. So I'm studying my own consciousness. I'm studying God's consciousness, and I'm being recharged the more I remember the Supreme Being and make that connection, that relationship. So people have the concept of good karma being doing good for people, and bad karma being doing harm to people. But in actual fact, if people do a good karma with wanting something for themselves, wanting prestige, name and fame, wanting reassurance that they are good, that's also a deep thing, that I might do things to have a reassurance that I am good. I might need a lot of people to tell me I'm good, to feel good. And if I feel good from my own identity and God's identity, because God is the Father of the soul, a loving being that doesn't see my weaknesses, then I'll feel sustained, fulfilled, and I'll start to have what we call self-sovereignty. Self-sovereignty is basically something that you learn at the end of a cycle of time. At the end of the time cycle, we get this time called the confluence age. And the confluence age is the time to settle all our accounts. It's the time at the end of the cycle and the beginning of the new cycle. So the old cycle is about to finish, and the new cycle is being nurtured, and it's nurtured here before it becomes a material thing, because it will reflect that. When I lose the contamination that I've got inside of me, I, the soul, then I become uncontaminated, and the pure gold, the pure diamond that was there all along, the highest feeling of the self, will re-emerge. So it's just covered in layers of dust. And this is all the teachings really of the Supreme Soul through the physical medium's body. And that's all he comes to do, really. He doesn't come as in a birth. At birth, he doesn't come in a medium's body that's in the womb. He actually comes in a medium's body that's very mature and has that clarity within themselves, so they're not too constipated with a load of rubbish, contaminated with a load of rubbish in their mind, and they can get themselves out of the way so that the Supreme Soul can tell the whole story, not the middle of the story, but from beginning through the middle to the end. So it is a little bit like Shakespeare said, that we all have our exits and our entrances and we're just playing roles on the world stage. But it runs much deeper than that when you think of the identity, not being the costume, not being how I look, not being my background, not being what I've done in the past. Everything is forgiven by the Supreme Soul because it is the embodiment of forgiveness. But what we struggle to understand fully is forgiving the self. And you will only actually forgive yourself completely and forget all that you've ever done and forgive everyone else and forget everyone else's misdemeanors by living as a soul, living as a child of God. So we become children of God so that He can actually recharge the batteries, and then we no longer need His services, so we become custodians of matter. It was called originally Satyog. It was called in the Christianity the Adam and Eve era, and Adam and Eve was derived from Adidev, which meant first man. And there was a soul that would listen to this primarily from the Supreme Soul, and the Supreme Soul knew who he was because he was one of the most elevated souls on the earth and played the role of Krishna or Narayan on the world stage, or you could say the pure state of Adam. Doesn't really matter, they're only names we're fencing with. But the most important thing that we understand is that when I've got my true identity, I don't identify with anything that's needy. Anything that's needy of my identity, I'll be in bondage to even further and more dependent, and that means suffering will increase, it won't reduce. So good karma is anything that's done in the identity of the true self, the peaceful soul. Anything you do, anything you say, anything you think is even pure karma. Impure karma is contaminated with the identity of the body. So maybe I'll do another one on this one, I'm not sure. It'd be interesting if there was any feedback at all so that I can see what your thoughts are, because they're important, what your thoughts are. But all souls don't come at the beginning. Some souls come in the middle of time, of a cycle. Some souls come at the end of a cycle. The ones that came at the beginning of the cycle will have a different level of morality. No one's to blame for this because they're one's charged to the full as 100 volt, one's charged to the full as a 50 volt, one's charged to the full of a 3 volt, but all three are charged. So, Om Shanti.